The phone rang at 2 a.m., and I knew, before I even opened my eyes, that nothing good happens at that hour. I'd been sleeping in the chair next to my father's bed, like I had every night for the past 6 months, listening to the rattle of his breathing through the baby monitor. The sound of that old rotary phone, God, we still had that thing, cut through the darkness of the mansion like a scream. My heart was already pounding when I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" My voice came out scratchy, confused, and then I heard it. A voice, rough, like gravel being dragged across concrete, but with something underneath that made every hair on my body stand up. "Pinky swear, Marty?" I dropped the phone. Actually dropped it. Because those words, those exact words, hadn't been spoken out loud in 42 years. Not since Tommy and I were kids, hiding under blankets, making promises we swore we'd never break. Tommy died when he was 10 years old. I buried him. I watched them lower that tiny white coffin into the ground while my mother screamed and my father stood silent as stone. So, whoever this was, whatever sick joke this was, I picked up the phone with shaking hands. "Who is this?" The voice came back, urgent now, almost panicked. "It's me, Marty. It's Tommy. Don't trust the nurse, Greta. And you need to go to the cemetery. Tonight. Dig up my grave." Dad hid the truth there. Then the line went dead. I sat there in that dark room, my father's wheezing the only sound, and I felt something break open inside my chest. Fear, maybe. Or hope. Or fury. I don't know. What I do know is that 10 minutes later, I was walking through the fog toward our family cemetery with a flashlight in one hand and a shovel in the other. And I had absolutely no idea if I was about to prove I'd lost my mind or discover that everything I'd believed for 4 decades was a lie. I dug for 3 hours. My hands blistered and bled. The dirt got under my nails, in my hair, in my mouth. I hit the coffin around 5 a.m., just as the sky started to turn that sickly gray color that comes before dawn. The wood was soft, rotten. It crumbled when I pried it open with the shovel. And that's when I saw it. No bones, no body, just sandbags, the kind you use for floods. And sitting on top of them, staring up at me with empty painted eyes, was a porcelain doll with its head deliberately broken. Someone had weighted that coffin to feel like a child's body. Someone had staged my brother's funeral like a theater production. I fell to my knees in that open grave, covered in mud and rot, and I started laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was screaming and never stopping. My father, the man dying in his bed 200 yards away, had faked his own son's death. He'd let us bury sandbags while Tommy... What? Where had Tommy been all this time? And if Tommy was alive, then who the hell was the man sleeping in my father's room? The man I'd been caring for, feeding, bathing for months. I looked back at the mansion, and every window was dark except one, the 3rd floor, where Greta's room was, and I swear to God, I saw the curtain move. I tried to clean myself up before going back inside, but there's only so much you can do when you're covered in grave dirt and existential horror. I used the garden hose by the side entrance, watching the mud swirl down the drain, and all I could think was, confront him. Now. Wake him up and make him tell me everything. My hands were still shaking as I pushed open the heavy oak door and climbed the stairs to my father's bedroom. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The same clock that had marked every moment of my childhood, every lie. But when I reached his door, Greta was standing there like a sentinel. She'd appeared out of nowhere, the way she always did, wearing those pristine white scrubs that made her look more like a prison guard than a nurse. Her eyes traveled from my wet hair down to my muddy boots, and something flickered across her face. Not surprise. Recognition. "Martha," she said, and her voice was cold, controlled. "Where have you been? It's 5:30 in the morning." I opened my mouth to answer, but she stepped directly into my path, her body blocking the doorway. "Your father needs his rest. The medication has finally stabilized him. You can see him after breakfast." "Get out of my way, Greta." I'd never spoken to her like that before. For 3 years, she'd been running this house, running my father's care, and I'd been… what? Grateful. Obedient? She didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was a specimen under glass. "Why are you covered in mud, Martha?" The question hung in the air between us. Not concern, accusation. And that's when I saw it, really saw it. The way she stood wasn't protective. It was possessive, territorial. This woman wasn't here to heal my father. She was here to guard something, to keep something contained. My stomach turned to ice. I wanted to shove past her, to scream, to demand answers, but something stopped me. Instinct, maybe, or survival. Because the look in Greta's eyes told me that if I pushed right now, if I revealed what I knew, something bad would happen, something final. So instead, I forced myself to step back. "I couldn't sleep," I said, keeping my voice level. "I went for a walk. Lost track of time." Greta's expression didn't change, but I saw her shoulders relax just slightly. "You should shower and rest," she said. "Your father will want to see you this afternoon. He's been asking for you." I went to my room like a good daughter, locked the door, stripped off the filthy clothes and stood under the scalding shower until my skin turned red. But I couldn't wash away the image of that empty coffin. Couldn't stop thinking about Tommy's voice on the phone, about 42 years of carefully constructed grief that had all been theater. I was sitting on the edge of my bed in a towel, staring at nothing, when the phone on my nightstand rang. Not the rotary phone downstairs. My cell phone. Unknown number. My hand hovered over it for 3 rings before I answered. "Meet me at the old dock. Now." Tommy's voice. And this time, I could hear something in it I'd missed before. Desperation. Fear. And underneath that, something else. Rage that had been simmering for 4 decades. I looked at my closed bedroom door, thought about Greta standing guard outside my father's room like she was protecting a vault instead of a dying man. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I whispered. "Marty?" His voice cracked. "Don't tell anyone. Not yet. If Greta knows I'm back." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The old dock hadn't been used in years. The wood was rotting. Half the planks were missing, and it jutted out into the lake like a broken finger pointing at nothing. I'd avoided this place since Tommy's accident, since the day they told us he'd drowned here, that his body had been swept away by the current. Standing there now, with the morning mist rolling off the water, I felt like I was walking into my own ghost story. He was sitting on the edge with his legs dangling over the water, and when he turned around, I saw it. The eyes. God, those eyes were exactly the same. Dark brown with flecks of gold, the left one slightly lazy. We just stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. I was looking for proof, and he must have seen it on my face because he stood up slowly, rolled up his left sleeve, and showed me his inner forearm. The scar was still there. A jagged lightning bolt shape where he'd fallen out of the oak tree when he was 8. I had the exact same scar on my right forearm from the same tree, different summer. "We said we were twins," I whispered, and I was crying now. Blood twins. Forever. Tommy nodded, his jaw tight. "Pinky swear," he said. And just like that, 42 years collapsed into nothing. We sat down on the dock together, and the question that came out was, "Where have you been?" Tommy looked out at the water, at the place where he supposedly drowned, and his expression went dead. "St. Augustine's Home for Boys, 6 hours north. Dad drove me there himself." I felt my stomach drop. "I thought it was a special trip," he continued, his voice eerily calm. "Just me and Dad. He said we were going fishing. We drove for hours. When we pulled up to this fortress of a building, all gray stone and barred windows, he turned to me and said, 'Your mother and sister died in a fire last night. The men who did it are looking for you. You have to stay here. If you leave, if you tell anyone your real name, they'll kill you too.'" I couldn't breathe. I was 10 years old, Marty. I believed him. Tommy's hands clenched into fists. And the nuns were told I was an orphan, that my whole family was dead. Dad gave them a fake name, Thomas Brennan, and a fat donation. I grew up thinking you and Mom had burned alive. For years, I had nightmares about it. I could smell the smoke, hear you screaming. None of it was real, but it was real to me. He pulled out a newspaper clipping, folded so many times it was nearly transparent. I recognized it. From 3 months ago, our prominent businessman Joseph Whitmore enters hospice care. Below it was a photo of the mansion, and in the background, barely visible, was me, alive. "I was at a diner," Tommy said. "I saw this and my heart stopped. That's when I knew he'd lied about everything." I looked at the water, at the exact spot where they'd told us Tommy had drowned. "The insurance money," I said suddenly. "Oh my God, the insurance money." Tommy turned to me sharply. "He took out a policy on me, didn't he?" "It had to be massive," I said, my mind racing. "The company was failing in the '82, then you died, and suddenly everything was fine. Better than fine. We moved to the mansion. Dad expanded the business. I went to expensive schools. We lived like kings." The words tasted like poison. "I paid for your life," Tommy said quietly. "My death bought you everything." I grabbed his hand. "I didn't know. I swear, Tommy, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," he said. "But Dad knew, and Marty. He's not the only one." I thought about Greta, about the way she'd blocked my father's door. "The nurse?" I whispered. Tommy nodded grimly. "I've been watching the house for 3 weeks. Greta's not a nurse. She's something much worse. And if Dad dies before we expose what he did, she's going to disappear with everything. We need to get back into that house. We need to find proof, insurance documents, the death certificate, anything." He stood, offered me his hand. "Are you with me?" I looked at my brother, this stranger who was somehow still my blood twin. "I'm with you," I said. Tommy smiled sadly. "Good, because when we're done, everything Dad built is going to come crashing down. But there's something else you need to know first, something about Greta that's going to make you sick." We waited until noon, when Greta always took her lunch break in the sunroom, the only predictable thing about her routine. Tommy knew the house better than I expected. He'd been watching it for weeks, learning the patterns, the blind spots. We slipped in through the servants' entrance, the one that hadn't been used since the staff was let go years ago, and climbed the narrow back stairs to the 3rd floor. The attic was exactly as I remembered it, dusty, suffocating, filled with the debris of our family's history. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, old furniture covered in sheets like ghosts. "It'll be here," Tommy whispered, pulling down a box labeled 1982, business records. His hands were shaking. We tore through box after box, coughing on decades of dust, until Tommy pulled out a manila folder with my father's law firm's logo on it. Inside was the insurance policy. I read it 3 times because my brain refused to process what I was seeing. $5 million. Life insurance on Thomas Joseph Whitmore, Jr., age 10. Policy date, March 15th, 1982. Tommy's death date, June 3rd, 1982. Less than 3 months later. "Oh God," I breathed. "This is premeditated. He planned this." Tommy's face had gone white. "Keep looking. There has to be more." There was bank statements showing the company was $2.3 million in debt in early 1982. Foreclosure notices, loan default warnings. And then, dated June 10th, 1982, 1 week after Tommy's funeral, a deposit of $5 million into my father's business account. Below that, a ledger in my father's handwriting. I recognized that sharp, aggressive script, line items, St. Augustine's, $50,000 annual. Dr. Castellanos, $25,000. Certificate processing, $10,000. He'd budgeted his son's disappearance like a business expense. Tommy made a sound like a wounded animal, and I realized he was crying. Not sad crying, rage crying. He saved everything, I said, my voice hollow. Every receipt, every transaction, like he was proud of it, like it was just another deal. Tommy grabbed another folder, this one thinner. Inside was a death certificate, Thomas Joseph Whitmore Jr., cause of death, drowning, signed by Dr. Ramon Castellanos, medical examiner. That's the name from the ledger, I said. Dad paid him off. But there was something else in the folder, a birth certificate. I pulled it out, confused at first, and then my blood turned to ice. Tommy, look at this. It was a birth certificate for Greta Castellanos, born 1965. Father, Dr. Ramon Castellanos. Huh, she's his daughter, Tommy said slowly. The medical examiner who signed my fake death certificate. Greta is his daughter. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. She's not here to take care of Dad, I whispered. She's here because she knows. She's known the whole time. Her father must have told her about the fraud before he died, and now she's blackmailing him, Tommy finished. That's why she controls everything. That's why she won't let anyone near him. She's been draining the estate for years, and Dad can't say a word because if he does, the whole thing unravels. He's trapped. We heard footsteps on the stairs below. Heavy, deliberate. Greta's footsteps. She knows we're here, I breathed. Tommy grabbed the folders, stuffing them inside his jacket. The window, he hissed. Now. We crossed to the small attic window, the one that led to the roof. I hadn't climbed out there since I was a teenager, sneaking out to smoke cigarettes and pretend I was brave. My hands fumbled with the latch as the footsteps grew closer. The door handle started to turn. Tommy shoved the window open and practically threw me through it, following right behind. We crouched on the sloped roof, barely breathing, as we heard Greta enter the attic below. She knew. She absolutely knew. And now we had to figure out what the hell she was going to do about it. We stayed on that roof for 20 minutes, listening to Greta move through the attic below. She wasn't searching frantically. That's what terrified me. Her footsteps were methodical, calm, like she was taking inventory of what had been disturbed. When she finally left, we waited another 10 minutes before climbing back inside. My legs were cramping, my heart was hammering, and all I could think was, she knows we found something. Tommy led me down the back stairs to the old gardener's cottage at the edge of the property, a place that hadn't been occupied in 15 years. We locked ourselves inside, and only then did he pull out the folders again. We need to understand exactly who we're dealing with, Tommy said, spreading the documents across the dusty table. Greta's not just some opportunist who stumbled onto a secret. This is generational. Her father committed fraud for mine, and now she's cashing in on it. He pulled out his phone, a cheap burner, and started searching. Within minutes, he found Dr. Ramon Castellanos' obituary from 2003. Respected medical examiner, died of a heart attack, survived by his daughter, Greta Castellanos, registered nurse. When did Greta start working for your father? Tommy asked. I thought back. 3 years ago, right after his first stroke. She came with impeccable references, said she specialized in elder care. I was so grateful. I couldn't handle it alone, and she seemed so competent. 3 years, Tommy repeated. That's enough time to systematically drain an estate if you know what you're doing. He opened another browser tab, Started searching financial records. Do you have access to Dad's accounts? I shook my head. Greta has power of attorney. She said it was necessary for medical decisions. I signed off on it because I trusted her. The words felt like broken glass in my throat. Tommy looked at me, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not blame, but pity. She's been playing you, Marty. The caring nurse routine, making you feel like you couldn't manage without her. Classic manipulation. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have something that belongs to me. Let's talk like adults. The library, 4 p.m. Come alone or I call the police about the vandalized grave. I showed it to Tommy. His jaw clenched. She's threatening you with the one thing that could actually get you arrested, desecrating a burial site. She's smart. I'm not going alone, I said. You can't come with me, Tommy said quickly. If she sees me? If she knows I'm alive and actively involved? Marty, she could make me disappear. Legally, I don't exist. Thomas Whitmore died in 1982. I'm just Thomas Brennan, some random guy with no ID, no social security, nothing tying me to this family. She could have me committed, arrested for trespassing, anything. The reality of it hit me like a sledgehammer. My brother had been erased so completely that even his return from the dead was legally impossible. Then what do we do? I asked. Tommy was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he looked up at me with an expression I remembered from childhood, the look he'd get right before suggesting something reckless and brilliant. I've been tracking her movements for weeks. Every day at 6 p.m., she goes to Dad's room with his evening medications. That's when she's most vulnerable, when she's alone with him, when she thinks she's in control. He leaned forward. And we need to know what she's really giving him, because Marty, I don't think she's trying to keep him alive. The words hung in the air between us like a noose. You think she's poisoning him? I think she's accelerating the inevitable, Tommy said carefully. Dad's dying anyway. But if she can speed it up, if she can make sure he dies before anyone starts asking questions about where all his money went, she walks away clean. The estate settles, she gets whatever she's already siphoned off, and nobody's around to dispute it. We're running out of time. He grabbed my shoulders, looked me dead in the eye. You need to go to that meeting. You need to face her. But while you're distracting her in the library, I'm going to switch out whatever medication she's giving him. If we can keep him alive a little longer, lucid enough to tell the truth. Then we have a witness, I finished. The only witness who can corroborate everything? Tommy nodded. But you have to be careful. Greta's dangerous. Marty. She's protected this secret for 20 years, and she's not going to let it go without a fight. When you walk into that library at 4 p.m., you're walking into a negotiation with someone who holds all the cards, except for one thing she doesn't know. What's that? I asked. Tommy smiled grimly. Inchi doesn't know that the ghost she helped create is back, and he's ready to haunt her. At 3:45 p.m., I walked back into the mansion through the front door like I owned the place. Because technically, I still did. At least until my father died, and whatever hell Greta had planned went into motion. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I kept my face calm, neutral. The library door was already open. Greta was sitting in my father's leather chair, the one he used to sit in when he'd lecture me about responsibility and family legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. She looked up when I entered, and her smile was thin, sharp as a scalpel. Martha, thank you for being punctual. Let's skip the pleasantries, I said, staying near the door. What do you want? Greta folded her hands on the desk, and I noticed for the first time how much she looked like her father in the obituary photo Tommy had shown me. Same cold eyes, same calculating expression. I want to know what you think you found in that attic, she said simply. And I want to know who helped you dig up a grave at 5 a.m. Because, Martha, I know you didn't do that alone. My blood went cold. but I forced myself to laugh. You sound paranoid, Greta. I couldn't sleep. I went for a walk. I got muddy. That's not a crime. Vandalism is, she said softly. Desecration of a burial site carries a sentence of up to 5 years in prison in this state. I have security camera footage of you at the cemetery with a shovel. I have photographs of the disturbed grave. All I have to do is make one phone call, and you'll spend the night in jail while I file for emergency conservatorship of your father's estate due to your obvious mental breakdown. She leaned back in the chair. Or we can come to an arrangement. You stop digging, literally and figuratively, into things that don't concern you, and I'll delete the footage. Your father dies peacefully in a few weeks. The estate is settled according to his wishes, and you walk away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Everyone wins. Except Tommy, I said before I could stop myself. The words just came out, and the second they did, I knew I'd made a mistake. Greta's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Tommy's dead, Martha. He's been dead for 42 years. You buried him yourself. Did I? I asked, and now I was walking toward the desk, toward her, fueled by a rage I'd been swallowing all day. Because that's funny, Greta. When I opened that coffin, all I found was sand and a broken doll. No bones, no body, just props, like someone staged the whole thing. The silence that followed was deafening. Greta stood up slowly, and I realized she was taller than me, stronger than me. You need to be very careful about what you're accusing people of, she said quietly. Your father is a dying man. Sometimes, in their final days, patients become confused. They tell stories. They make confessions that may or may not be true. And sometimes their family members, under extreme stress, start to believe things that aren't real. Grief does terrible things to the mind, Martha. I've seen it before. She walked around the desk, came closer. If you start spreading wild theories about insurance fraud and fake deaths, people are going to question your sanity. And when the police investigate that desecrated grave, they're going to find a very disturbed woman who's clearly having a psychotic break. Do you understand what I'm telling you? She was threatening me, clearly, coldly, efficiently, and the worst part was, she was right. I had no proof except the documents hidden in Tommy's jacket. Documents that could have been forged, a brother who legally didn't exist, and a grave full of sand that proved something happened, but not what. I understand perfectly, I said, stepping back. You want me to shut up and go away? Greta smiled. I want you to accept reality. Your father made choices. Your brother is gone, and in a few weeks, when Joseph passes, you'll have more money than you know what to do with. Take it. Move on. Live your life. She checked her watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's almost 6 p.m. Your father needs his evening medication. She walked past me toward the door, and every instinct in my body screamed to stop her, to tackle her, to do something. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to trust that Tommy was already in position, that he'd find a way to switch those medications before Greta could administer them. As she left, she paused in the doorway. Oh, and Martha. I'll be locking your father's door tonight. For his protection. You understand. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I stood there in that library, surrounded by books that had belonged to generations of Whitmores. And I realized that I was trapped in a game where Greta knew all the rules, and I was making them up as I went along. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd assumed I was alone. And somewhere in this house, my dead brother was about to become her worst nightmare. I waited in my room for 2 hours, pacing like a caged animal. Tommy had texted me once, just one word, done. He'd switched the medications. Whatever poison Greta had been giving my father was now replaced with saline. At midnight, my phone buzzed again. Tommy. He's awake, lucid. Meet me outside his door. Now. I crept down the hallway in the dark, my heart in my throat. Tommy was standing in the shadows, and he looked like a ghost, pale, gaunt, furious. "She locked it," he whispered, pointing at the door. "But I can pick it." His hands were steady as he worked the lock with 2 bent paper clips. The lock clicked. The door opened. The room was dark except for the moonlight coming through the window. My father was sitting up in bed, and for the first time in months, his eyes were clear. Actually clear. He looked at me first, confused, then his gaze shifted to Tommy standing in the doorway. I watched the recognition move across his face like a slow-motion car crash. First confusion, then shock, then absolute, bone-deep terror. "No," he whispered. "No, you're not real. You're not—" "Hello, Dad," Tommy said, and his voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "Surprised to see me?" My father tried to reach for the call button, but I grabbed it first, yanking it out of the wall. "Nobody's coming to save you," I said. "You're going to sit there and explain. Everything." Joseph's hands were shaking. "I did it for the family," he started, his voice weak. "The business was failing. We were going to lose everything. I had no choice." "You had a choice," Tommy said, stepping closer. "You could have filed for bankruptcy. You could have sold assets. You could have done literally anything except sell your own son. I didn't sell you. I protected you." Joseph's voice cracked. "That orphanage was safe. You had food and shelter." "You told me my family was dead," Tommy roared. "You let me grow up thinking my mother and sister burned alive. You stole 42 years of my life because you were too much of a coward to face your own failures." My father started crying, these horrible, wet sobs. "I was going to bring you back when you turned 18. I was going to explain—" "Liar," I said quietly. "You needed him to stay dead, because the moment he reappeared, the insurance fraud would be exposed." The silence that followed was broken by slow clapping. We all turned to see Greta standing in the doorway, her phone in her hand, recording. "Well," she said, smiling, "this is better than I could have hoped for. A full confession. A supposedly dead son returned from the grave. This is priceless." Tommy moved toward her, but she held up the phone. "This video is already uploading to 3 separate cloud servers. If anything happens to me, it goes straight to the police, the IRS, and every major news outlet in the state." She pulled out a document from her pocket. "Joseph is going to sign a new will tonight, leaving everything to me in exchange for my silence. Or I release this video and you all go to prison. Insurance fraud, falsifying death certificates, child abandonment. Take your pick." My father looked at the paper, and I saw him calculating. Even now, even caught, he was trying to figure out how to win. He reached for the pen on his nightstand. "Don't do it, Dad," Tommy said quietly. "For once in your miserable life, do the right thing." But Joseph was already reaching for that pen, and that's when I heard the sirens in the distance, getting closer. Greta's head snapped toward the window, her face going pale. "What did you do?" she hissed. Tommy smiled for the first time since entering the room. "I called them 2 hours ago, told them there was elder abuse in progress, financial exploitation. And funny thing about those medications you've been giving him, Greta, I had them tested this afternoon. They weren't heart medication. They were anticoagulants, blood thinners, in doses high enough to cause internal bleeding. You weren't just stealing his money, you were killing him." The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights flooded the room. Greta lunged for the door, but Tommy blocked her path. "Your father helped mine destroy my life," Tommy said softly. "And now I'm returning the favor." The police burst through seconds later, and Greta started screaming that we'd broken in, that we were trying to kill Joseph, that she was the victim. But the officers had the evidence Tommy had sent them, the medication bottles, the financial records. the death certificate signed by her father, and they had her video confession, which Tommy had been recording on his own phone from the hallway the entire time. She'd been so focused on capturing our confession that she hadn't noticed she was confessing too. As they handcuffed her and read her rights, she looked at me with pure hatred, and all I could think was, the house of cards is finally falling. But I had no idea how many people were still going to get crushed underneath it. The police didn't arrest my father that night. He was too sick, too close to death. But they did station an officer outside his door and confiscate every document in the house as evidence. By sunrise, our driveway was packed with cars. Not just police, but federal agents. The insurance fraud crossed state lines. Tommy's fake death certificate had been filed in federal databases. This wasn't just a family scandal anymore. It was a federal case. I sat in the kitchen drinking cold coffee while strangers in suits walked through our house cataloging everything. Every painting, every piece of furniture, every bank account. They were building a case, yes, but they were also calculating seizures, asset forfeiture. The government was going to take it all back. Tommy found me there around 10 a.m. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged another 10 years overnight. "They want me to give a statement," he said quietly. "About the orphanage, about what Dad told me, all of it." I nodded. "Are you going to?" "I have to," he said. "It's the only way to prove I'm really Thomas Whitmore. But Marty, once I do that, once it's official, the insurance company is going to sue the estate for the full $5 million plus interest. They're talking about $20 million in total damages. Everything Dad built with that blood money, it's all going to be taken. The house, the business, the accounts. There won't be anything left." I thought about that for a moment. About the mansion I'd grown up in, the life of luxury I'd lived without ever questioning where it came from. "Good," I said finally. "Let them take it. It was never really ours anyway." But the vultures were already circling. By noon, the relatives started showing up. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Distant family members who'd been living off quarterly trust distributions from the Whitmore fortune. They came in demanding to know what was happening, why there were federal agents in the house, why their monthly checks had been frozen. Uncle Richard, Dad's younger brother who'd never worked a day in his life, was the loudest. "This is insane!" he shouted in the foyer while an FBI agent calmly told him to leave. "Joseph built this empire from nothing. You can't just take it." "Actually, sir," the agent said, "your brother built this empire from insurance fraud and child trafficking. So yes, we can take it, and we will." When Uncle Richard found out about Tommy, that his dead nephew was actually alive and that the whole fortune was built on a lie, he went apoplectic. "You're destroying this family," he screamed at us. "Do you understand what you've done? We'll have nothing. My kids' trust funds, their college accounts, everything. Gone. You selfish." "Get out," I said quietly. "This is still my house until the government says otherwise. Get out." He left, but not before promising to sue us for emotional distress. 3 more relatives made similar threats. They didn't care that a child had been abandoned. They didn't care that Dad had committed fraud. All they cared about was that their meal ticket was about to disappear. By evening, the news trucks had arrived. Someone had leaked the story, probably one of the relatives hoping to spin it their way, and suddenly our family tragedy was breaking news. Wealthy businessman faked son's death for insurance money. Missing child found alive after 42 years. Nurse arrested for elder abuse and attempted murder. I watched the coverage from the library, numb to all of it. A reporter was standing at the front gate doing a live segment. At the Whitmore family, once pillars of this community, now at the center of one of the most shocking fraud cases in state history. Sources say the estate could be seized entirely, leaving the family penniless. Tommy came in and turned off the TV. "Dad's asking for us," he said. "Both of us." We walked to his room together. The police officer at the door let us through. My father looked smaller somehow, like he'd shrunk overnight. He knew he was dying. You could see it in his eyes. "I need to tell you something," he whispered when we sat down. "Before it's too late." Tommy crossed his arms. "What could you possibly say that matters now?" Joseph's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't give you back what I took. But I need you to know. I thought about you every single day. I hated myself every single day. And I was too much of a coward to make it right." He looked at me. "Martha, I gave you everything because I couldn't give him anything. I tried to buy my redemption through you. And that was wrong. You both deserved better than a father who chose money over his own children." Tommy stood up. "You're right. We did deserve better. And now, thanks to your choices, we're going to lose everything. The house, the money, the family name, it's all going to burn. But you know what, Dad? I hope you live just long enough to watch it happen." He walked out without looking back, and I realized that for Tommy, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, even if that justice meant we'd both end up with nothing. My father died 3 days later, not from Greta's poison, but from a massive stroke. Like his body had finally decided it was done carrying the weight of all those lies. I was there when it happened. So was Tommy. We didn't hold his hand. We didn't whisper comforting words. We just watched as Joseph Whitmore took his last breath and finally faced whatever judgment was waiting for him. The funeral was small. Just me, Tommy, and a priest who didn't know our family well enough to realize he was burying a monster. The relatives didn't come. They were too busy with their lawyers, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. The estate seizure happened faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, federal agents had frozen every account, repossessed every asset. The insurance company filed a lawsuit for $23 million, the original $5 million plus 42 years of compound interest and damages. The business was liquidated to pay creditors. The mansion was put up for auction. I had 30 days to remove my personal belongings before the locks were changed. I packed 3 suitcases, photos of my mother, some jewelry that had been hers, a few books. Everything else, the designer clothes, the expensive furniture, the trappings of a life built on blood money, I left behind. Let them auction it off. Let strangers buy the remnants of the Whitmore empire and never know what it really cost. On my last day in the house, I walked through every room one final time. The library where Greta had threatened me. The attic where we'd found the truth. My father's bedroom where he'd died without redemption. And finally, I went to Tommy's childhood room, the one that had been left exactly as it was in 1982, like a shrine to a ghost. I stood in the doorway and I cried. Not for the house or the money or the life I was losing, but for the 10-year-old boy who should have grown up here, who should have had birthdays and graduations, and a mother who got to watch him become a man. Tommy found me there. "You ready?" he asked gently. I nodded, wiping my eyes. "Where are we going?" "I told you," he said. "I have a farm. It's small, 60 acres in Vermont. I've got chickens, a couple of goats, a vegetable garden. It's not much, but it's mine. Nobody can take it away because I built it with my own hands, not with stolen money." He looked at me carefully. "There's a guest house. Needs some fixing up, but it's got good bones. You could stay there if you want. No pressure." I thought about that. About starting over at 58 years old with nothing but 3 suitcases and a brother I'd just gotten back. About leaving behind the only life I'd ever known. "I don't know anything about farming," I said. Tommy smiled, a real smile this time, not the bitter ones I'd seen over the past few weeks. Neither did I when I started, but I learned. And Marty, you know what I discovered? Waking up every morning and knowing that everything around you is real that you earned it honestly. That's worth more than any mansion." He put his hand on my shoulder. I spent 42 years thinking I had nothing. No family, no past, no real identity. But I was wrong. I had myself. I had the ability to build something real. And now I have you back. That's not nothing. That's everything. We walked out of that house together, leaving the door unlocked behind us. I didn't look back. Tommy had packed his old truck, the same beat-up Ford he'd driven here 3 weeks ago, and we climbed in. As we pulled away, I saw the auction signs going up on the front lawn. Estate sale. Everything must go. A chapter was closing. No, not closing. Burning. Burning completely to ash so that something real could finally grow in its place. Tommy turned on the radio and some old country song came on, and I realized I was smiling. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I was actually smiling because I'd lost everything. And somehow, that meant I finally had a chance to find out who Martha Whitmore really was when she wasn't living in a house built on lies. 6 months later, I was standing in a vegetable garden with dirt under my fingernails and sweat on my forehead, and I'd never felt more alive. The guest house Tommy had mentioned was now mine. We'd spent 3 months fixing it up together, learning as we went. I'd learned how to patch drywall, how to can vegetables, how to tell when the chickens were about to lay. Simple things. Real things. Things that no one could ever take away from me because they weren't built on someone else's suffering. Tommy and I had dinner together every Sunday, and sometimes we talk about the past, about Mom, about the childhood that was stolen. But mostly, we talked about the present, about his plans to expand the greenhouse, about my idea to start selling preserves at the farmer's market. Normal things, beautiful things. The legal case wrapped up last month. Greta was sentenced to 15 years for elder abuse, attempted murder, and fraud. She'd been draining the estate for years, over $4 million in total. She never showed remorse, not even at sentencing. Just kept insisting she was owed that money for keeping the secret. The insurance company got their settlement from the liquidated estate. The relatives got nothing, and most of them haven't spoken to us since. Uncle Richard's kids had to drop out of private school. The cousins had to sell their vacation homes. And honestly, I don't feel bad about it. They lived off blood money for decades without asking questions. Now they know the truth, and it's not my job to make them feel better about it. The night before the sentencing, I'd driven back to see the mansion one last time. It had been sold to a tech CEO from California who planned to gut it and modernize it. The Whitmore name was being erased, literally painted over. And standing there looking at it, I felt nothing. No nostalgia. No grief, just a quiet sense of closure. That building had been a beautiful prison, and I'd finally escaped. My father had thought he could buy happiness by selling his son. He died alone, hated, with nothing. The truth became the only inheritance that mattered, the only one that couldn't be seized or auctioned or stolen. And that truth set me free. So here's what I learned. You can bury a lie, but it doesn't stay buried. Secrets don't disappear. They grow roots. They poison everything they touch until someone finally has the courage to dig them up and face them in the light. My brother called me at 2 a.m. and told me to open a grave, and that phone call gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Not just him, but myself. The real version. The one who isn't afraid to lose everything because she knows that the only things worth keeping are the ones you can't put a price on. But you know what's wild? While I was recovering my brother who I thought was dead, there's a woman out there who desperately wished hers was. Picture this. You come home early from a business trip, excited to surprise your husband. But when you pull into the driveway, you see your sister-in-law's car, your brother's wife, parked in your spot. You hear sounds coming from your bedroom. The kind of sounds that make your blood run cold. But here's the thing. She doesn't scream. She doesn't cry. She pulls out her phone, records everything, and then starts digging. Because she discovers they're not just betraying her heart, they're stealing millions from the family company. And the revenge she orchestrates, it leaves them both homeless, jobless, and exposed in less than 24 hours. Some people bury secrets. Others bury the people who kept them. Want to know which one she chose?